Right then, Newcastle fans, after a quiet couple of weeks on the transfer window front with no real substantial links, it looks like the chase for James Trafford, the goalkeeper from Burnley, is starting to hot up. So let's take a closer look at why I think this could be a brilliant bit of business for Newcastle United between the sticks. It's all coming up, so make sure you stick around. Welcome back to Black and White Banter, ladies and gentlemen. It feels like quite a while since I've been in front of this. I think the last time was doing my end of season awards. Well, end of season 24-25 season is unfortunately pretty much forgotten about. The one I never want to forget, and all eyes are on the transfer window. And as I record this, we are in the last day of the mini window, the first 10 days before it closes for 6 days. And it's been a exhausting last couple of weeks, and I'll be totally honest with you, I am not the content creator who's going to do a video about every random link from a journalist trying to get a bit of punch and get a couple of clicks on social media. It is getting ridiculous. So I am going to talk about the ones that look a little bit more likely and a little bit more believable. If you're new around here though, Newcastle fans, do us a favour, what that follow, what that subscribe, and get Black and White Banter across all social media. The content will never stop, and there's a long summer with plenty to talk about as we approach pre-season. But look, James Trafford, the Burnley goalkeeper who Newcastle have now been linked with for what, a solid 2 years? It's hotting up, and Sky Sports News, again, as I record this, are speaking about us being in negotiations about a £30 million deal for Burnley's goalkeeper, who kept an incredible number of clean sheets as they got promotion back to the Premier League. But as I've already mentioned, James Trafford and Newcastle United are not two phrases that go together for the first time. Backtrack to last summer, Newcastle United were heavily linked and apparently in talks with the goalkeeper. And we, which is frustrating for us right now, I think for all of our board, last summer we were in a much better position to negotiate for a lower fee. Burnley had just been relegated. Trafford hadn't had the best of seasons, which we'll get into in a little bit in this video. And the fee was being talked about from Fabrizio Romano of about £15 million. That broke down. I think Trafford was probably very disappointed that it did for whatever reason. Fast forward a year, and we are now talking about 30 million as Burnley in our Premier League side, but they still do need money to reinvest, which is why this is probably still an attractive one for them. And we're looking at double the fee being talked about. But again, in the modern world of football, is 30 million for someone with his ceiling, with his age, with his profile, a lot of money? I would argue it's not. But let's look a little bit closer at James Trafford, the last couple of years he's had, and then get into some stats why I think, compared to our current number one, Nick Pope, this is a good bit of business. I think a good starting point from James Trafford in terms of the last couple of years in his life and his career is probably his mentality. Now, if you went back to last summer, again, Burnley had just been relegated. He'd conceded 62 goals in 28 matches. His save percentages were considerably lower than they are a year on today. And he got dropped by Vincent Kompany for their last 10 games of the season. So going into the summer, James Trafford, not only did his price come down, he wasn't in a good place mentally. I think that's fair to say. And what's really interesting is to hear about Scott Parker talking about James Trafford when he came into the club. He's come out and said that he had a lot of work to do, and what he's been most impressed by him to see such a young player with such his ego bruised, his confidence bruised, is that he built up that mentality and he's got back to a place where, in Scott Parker's words, he's a world-class goalkeeper. And James Trafford's not too short on confidence a year later as well. He even said this about himself, as tongue-in-cheek as it was.
Yeah, I know I'm a world-class goalkeeper.
But again, expectation of a quality football is something that James Trafford has had to deal with now for a number of years. Anyone who will remember, he helped England youth team win the tournament not too long ago with a penalty save, a penalty double save, and he was the hero. And when England youth win tournaments, you will guarantee there'll be an article 10 years later about where they are or what happened to them all. And James Trafford was one of those heroes. So he's always had that level of expectation as a hot prospect. But fast forward now, and I think with Nick Pope in mind, who I personally think shot stopping alone, sweeping and collecting the ball, now that we've seen him back to his best, is still a really, really good quality goalkeeper. James Trafford would come into this football club as great competition for him with a couple of attributes that are a little bit better. So let's do some stat deep diving into James Trafford's season at Burnley in the Championship and where him and Pope are different and where him and Nick Pope are the same. Well, look, in terms of defensive teams to come from, I think James Trafford and Burnley last season was just incredible. A record 29 clean sheets from 45 matches is a stat in itself, and obviously helped by Burnley's solid defence and Scott Parker's, at times, park the bus mentality that got different plaudits and criticism as the Championship season went on. They got out of the division, and that's the most important thing. But if you deep dive a little bit more, fewest goals conceded, best prevented goal stats, and as I've just mentioned, clean sheets. He even got a consecutive clean sheets record in the Championship midway through the season as well. He is coming from some good cloth and some good stock, where that mentality and that confidence has grown after the awful season getting relegated the year before. With a save percentage of 84% per 90 on top of all of those clean sheets, which speak for themselves, it's safe to say that James Trafford, when it comes to the shot stopping, which I will always prioritise as a goalkeeper, is pretty nifty. And I'll share some different graphics on the screen of different angles that James Trafford has been so monumental for Burnley in last season. Reaction saves, long distance shot saves, chucking in there 2 penalty saves in one match against someone we know all too well, and we're going to know all too well a little bit more next season, Sunderland. I'm sure you all saw that on the Championship highlights if you didn't watch it not too long ago. James Trafford is a very reliable shot stopper. What I will say, and this is going to be a big test which I'll talk about later in the video, because Burnley's defence and Scott Parker's mentality with them was so good, his saves on average per 90 are considerably lower compared to other goalkeepers around him. So yes, there is an element of him not having as much to do, particularly compared to Nick Pope in the Premier League last season. But again, you can only save what's in front of you, and those percentages in a frantic league like the Championship are still very, very good. But I think what a lot of Newcastle fans want to know about is what makes James Trafford very similar and also very different to Nick Pope, with collecting the ball, with doing things that aren't just saving shots. Because I think records speak for themselves. James Trafford's good at that area, but Nick Pope, that's not an area that me personally and a lot of you Newcastle fans are worried about in terms of shot stop, and it's other elements of the game that suit an Eddie Howe style. So let's look at that now. Well, it's safe to say that James Trafford, if you were to put him in a line next to Nick Pope, doesn't mind the ball at his feet considerably more than a very nervous Nick Pope, who wouldn't even admit if you were drinking with him down the pub that that's an area of his game that he favours, or that he would say is one of his strongest. From open play passes, James Trafford comes in at an 87% success rate, and I'm going to share on the screen all of the white arrows are successful compared to red, which is unsuccessful. An area of his game where I would say he rivals Nick Pope, where they are very similar, is his throwing out success. Nick Pope has an incredible reach because he's such a tall man. It's throwing the ball out wide to central areas. And again, James Trafford with 99% success rate at a mix of distances. Again, as you can see, that comes in pretty solid. So that's a similarity. But interestingly, even from goal kicks, 88% success rate across different distances. That means not only static can he pick a pass out, but from open play. And I'm just going to share some videos on the screen. Look at how much calmer in high pressure situations James Trafford can be when he's got high pressing teams breathing down his neck. Nobody watching this can tell me that Nick Pope in those similar situations can be as cool as what some of these graphics show. And I know this just tells a small area, but when you match it up to the stats, picking out a few video clips, everything correlates to show that he is a much better goalkeeper at passing, and a one that I think Eddie Howe is finding a nice balance between his shot stopper and someone who's good with the ball at his feet. Because in the European world, the higher stakes world, not from a Burnley, maybe from a Valencia or a Brazilian side, the likes of Edison at Manchester City, they've shown that the combination of two costs a lot of money, 50, 60 million pounds, which I think 30 million with these things considered is a decent snip. Now here's another, in my opinion, very important element of James Trafford's game in making this Newcastle side tick. Now I'm going to cast your mind back to when Martin Dubravka came in when Nick Pope was injured. Lots of Newcastle fans will say he didn't do much wrong. We went on a 9-match winning run, but I always argued that he had very little to do. Now the most notable thing about why Martin Dubravka wasn't hugely suited to our back four, and I don't think was ever going to be Newcastle's option longer term, was the fact that Martin Dubravka is not a goalkeeper who likes to come off his line. He doesn't like to sweep. That means that Newcastle's back four have to drop deep when we're in possession rather than all pushing forward as one. Nick Pope has always been a good sweeper, even if the ball goes into Rose Ed. James Trafford is very comfortable in reading the game and coming out. I'm going to share another graphic on the screen showcasing where he receives passes with the white, and all of the black dots are where he has swept, where he has mopped up an attack. Now, in terms of where the passes go and how successful they were from this sweeping, it's not always successful. Shorter passes, yes, of course. Longer passes, not so much. But when it's very reactive, like a goalkeeper has to be in terms of sweeping, you don't expect further passes to be always successful. But the fact that he is comfortable in doing so and Eddie Howe doesn't have to train that into him is important in how Newcastle like to press and how we like to play in our system. Again, a one that matches Nick Pope, but is very, very important to making this Newcastle side tick next season. Now, here's what's going to be key for me. I've rhymed off the stats. I think James Trafford is a great prospect for Newcastle to come in and compete with Nick Pope. Now, that word compete is key. I'm seeing a lot of Newcastle fans on social media as I create this video saying that for £30 million he comes in as number one, he doesn't come in to compete. Could Nick Pope be going out the other way? I sincerely hope not. But I do not buy into this logic that because a player costs 30 million, it means he's our number one. That is not how a club grows. Newcastle need to sign 30 million players to do just that. Compete. Compete with each other on the training ground. Stay competitive, just like Gordon and Barnes. Just like for a level last season, Tonali and Longstaff, which sounds mad to say now. Just like Murphy and hopefully a right winger to come in. Just like Isak and hopefully a striker to come in. It's how you build a better squad with Champions League football to play. So I don't buy that argument at all. What I will say about this signing is, can James Trafford step up? The stats are there, I've said that. He's 22 years age, which suits our demographic, and he's a brilliant prospect for the future, even with that ability to sell on. For his price to increase if he performs at the highest level. Champions League being the highest level. Newcastle United hopefully competing with the top four, top five being the highest level. £30 million isn't that much money in the current market. I know we have to watch what we spend this summer to spread the cost, the budget that we have across the squad, and that's why I think a goalkeeper is an area that so many Newcastle fans have talked about for a while. It might not be who you want to see through first, but it looks like a bit of business which I'm really hoping gets over the line. Can James Trafford step up in a higher pressure environment? Because when he was last in the Premier League, he looked short on confidence, he was very shaky, lots of errors leading to goals, whereas he had none. But that was a very different team that he played in, a very nervous, awful Burnley team that never really competed at any point last season, and they did not make the transfers to even stand a chance of staying up in the Premier League. Different environment, and I think Eddie Howe has proven he can get the best out of players and push them on, even if James Trafford has to be patient when he comes in. Anyway, Newcastle fans, I hope this has been helpful in terms of giving you a bit of a rundown on who might be our first signing through the door as I record this. Get down, let us know your thoughts. Are you happy with James Trafford? Is he the start of what could be a very promising window with the budget that we have? Or would you have liked to have seen another goalkeeper coming in? I want to know. And if you have liked this, you know what to do. Help this channel out by whacking that follow, giving us a comment, and whacking that notification bell so Black and White Banter keeps you updated. I'm going to be doing another transfer video on João Pedro from Brighton, who we are being heavily linked with on the regular, who I think would be another great signing for Newcastle. So make sure you are subscribing to check out that one. We'll keep our eyes out to see whether we've got another goalkeeper coming through the door. Fingers crossed, this transfer window promises everything we are all hoping for as Newcastle fans for a huge season next season. And as always, keep the faith. Hooyah, lads!